Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me one quick favor, see that little black subscribe button on the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, hit that little black subscribe button. Really does help this channel grow, my audience grow, and I appreciate it more than you know. Thank you again. Now, here's the video that you came here for. Switch gears, and I do want to go ahead and give an update from a story that we covered a lot last week, and that is the status of Mel Tucker, Michigan State football coach, although I think it's safe to say now he is officially the former Michigan State football coach. So I want to go ahead and give an update. Quick reminder, I always say whenever there's serious topics like this, let's just be aware who we're listening with, all of that. It's going to be a serious conversation. If you got kids in the car, whatever, just be aware. But I want to dive in because there is an update and just a very, very quick 1-minute reminder of how we got here. Mel Tucker, head football coach, Michigan State. A report comes out 2 Saturdays ago that he is being investigated for sexual harassment. We find out via a USA Today report that it involves a relationship with a woman who has been hired by the university named Brenda Tracy. She is a sexual assault advocate, somebody who unfortunately, obviously, awfully, experienced sexual assault. And so now she is hired by these schools and universities to come in, speak to football teams, speak to coaches, speak to players, whatever, and essentially to basically make sure that, the message gets out about respect for women, et cetera. Well, we find out late on that Saturday that there appears to be some sort of sexual relationship. We find out that the school has been doing a Title IX investigation. The school has interviewed both Mel Tucker and Brenda Tracy, and the two of them, basically, their accounts diverged. Mel Tucker told the school it was consensual. Brenda Tracy said it wasn't. And then on Monday, Mel Tucker, a week ago, came out and basically gave his side of the story through a statement from his lawyer, essentially reaffirmed that it was a consensual relationship, that the calls and the communication went on even after the call in which he was being investigated for. We know what happened on that phone call. But long story short, the last we heard about this story was Mel Tucker again releasing a statement through his lawyer, basically saying, I'm 100% innocent. I was estranged from my wife. This was a consensual adult relationship. Well, I bring it up because after a week, Michigan State essentially has announced that they basically disagree with Mel Tucker. They disagree with Mel Tucker, and on Monday afternoon, Mel Tucker was fired, and Michigan State intends to fire him with cause. Why that's important? Mel Tucker signed that 10-year contract more than $90 million a year ago, and that contract is essentially void. Michigan State is basically publicly saying, we do not plan on paying Mel Tucker a single dollar of that contract. And what I want to do is I want to read a specific excerpt from Michigan State's statement because I think it makes it a little bit clear on where they stand on this situation. Here is part of Michigan State's statement in terms of firing Mel Tucker. It says, your admitted behavior materially breached your obligation to conduct yourself professionally and ethically at all times. It is decidedly unprofessional and unethical to flirt, make sexual comments, and masturbate while on the phone with a university vendor. The unprofessional and unethical behavior is particularly egregious given that the vendor at issue was contracted by the university for the sole purpose of educating student athletes on and preventing instances of inappropriate sexual misconduct. Your admitted conduct engaging in sexual extramarital behavior with a university vendor rises to the level of a material breach of your contractual duty to the university to conduct yourself in a professional and ethical manner at all times. And so basically, Michigan State has said a lot of what we have discussed on this show over the last week. Listen, I want to make a few things clear. I understand this was, according to both parties, a consensual relationship. Right now, Brenda Tracy disagrees with some of the communication and what it meant and all of that. But to be clear, no crime was committed. And Mel Tucker very adamantly believes that it was a consensual relationship. He gives multiple examples of the communication they had even after that phone call. But at the end of the day, he was fired for the same reason I told you and so many others told you a week ago. I'm not going to sit here and claim, oh, I got this right, give me credit, pat on the back. It's not about that. But at the end of the day, I understand it was consensual. I understand they're two adults. I understand even that she is not an employee of the university. At the same time, the bottom line is this. First off, to be clear, when they write these contracts about basically conduct detrimental to the university, that is very wide-ranging for a reason. It's because a lot of stuff happens with a lot of gray area, and it's not always black and white. But at the same time, as soon as this happened, it was clear that he was never going to coach at Michigan State again. I don't care if a crime wasn't committed. I don't care even if his side of the events is 100% factual. The bottom line is pretty straightforward. You are a major university state employee, one of the faces of the university. As the school said, even if she's not an employee, she is a vendor of the university. She is on campus because you are paying her for a speech. She is a vendor of the university. She is being paid to be there. That is not someone you should have a relationship with if you are a $10 million a year football coach. And finally, and I think this is important, she was literally brought on campus to talk about relationships and inappropriate relationships between men and women. Now, if Mel Tucker's side of things is 100% accurate, certainly she did things that were probably out of the realm of what she should have been doing, but it doesn't matter the fact that Mel Tucker should not have engaged in this relationship at all, especially, by the way, if he's married. And I know he claims he's estranged. I don't care. It was a bad look. It was a bad decision. And let me say this. I don't care if it was a personal relationship. I don't care. Whatever. This is an all-time bag fumble by Mel Tucker. And I don't root against him. And I think he's going to get back into coaching at some point, whatever. But at the same time, when you get a $95 million contract, essentially, there's only three things you can't do. You can't break NCAA rules. And here's the good news. I don't think the NCAA even has rules anymore. So that's kind of out of the window. Don't get arrested. Don't do something so dumb that gets you arrested. And we know what that would be. And three, don't mess around with women that you shouldn't be messing around with. I'm not saying that Brenda Tracy isn't to blame. What I am saying is you had $95 million. Your kids were going to be set off of this contract. You could have gone 0-12 for the next 8 years and still earned every dollar of this contract. But you shouldn't have been doing this. We all know you shouldn't have been doing this. And that is why I have no sympathy for Mel Tucker. I don't care if it's consensual. I don't care how wrong she was. You had a lot to lose. It's like Nick Saban once said. Nick Saban, there's a famous quote about he told his players one time, said, if you're going to mess around with a girl, make sure she has as much to lose as you do. Oh, by the way, his exact quote was, if I'm going to cheat on Miss Terry, that's his wife. He said, I'm going to do it with Hillary Rodham freaking Clinton. The insinuation being she's got even more to lose than I do. And I'm sorry, Mel Tucker, you shouldn't have done it. I don't care if it was consensual. You should not have done it. So Mel Tucker is out. And I think the obvious question becomes, what's next at Michigan State? It was wild because I was thinking about this the other day. By week 3 of the last 2 seasons, we have had at least one power conference coach fired. And it's surprising that we hadn't gotten there to this point. 2 years ago, Clay Helton, remember, he got fired after week 2. USC got blown out by Stanford at home in week 2. He's out. Last year, Scott Frost was fired the 3rd week of the season. Remember, lost in week 0, come back. They barely survived week 1. I think they played North Dakota, and then they lose to Georgia Southern at home. Scott Frost out. Well, now Mel Tucker is out, and for the first time, we have ourselves an official coaching search at Michigan State. In terms of names, made a few phone calls on, really throughout the week, knowing that this was eventually going to happen. A couple names have come up. Okay, so one, I don't know that it's the sexiest, but it does make some sense. It's Pitt head coach Pat Narduzzi. Now, it's worth noting a couple things. Why Pat Narduzzi? Remember, he was the defensive coordinator at Michigan State forever under Mark D'Antonio, excuse me. Sorry. Like everybody else, I get Mike D'Antoni and Mark D'Antonio confused. He was the defensive coordinator forever under Mark D'Antonio, has Michigan State ties. And oh, by the way, he hasn't been bad at Pitt. Like, we can make fun of Pitt, and he's kind of weird, and he's the guy that's always outspoken about the portal, and he's criticized Lincoln Riley, and he's criticized Deion Sanders. But at the same time, last 2 years, won 11 games 2 years ago with Kenny Pickett, won the ACC. Remember, by the way, you know who they lost to in their bowl game? They lost to Michigan State. That's right. You can't make this stuff up. So he is one. And the other thing to remember is this. When Mel Tucker was put on administrative leave a week ago, remember who was brought back into that building? The man I just told you, Mark D'Antonio. And so the thought process is that he has ties to the program. He wants the job desperately. And it is worth noting, the guy who he had all that professional success with is in the building. And if you don't think that Mark D'Antonio is going to push for his guy to get the job, think again. So I'm not saying he's Michigan State's first choice, but I know it on fact that he is working very, very hard behind the scenes to get this job. A couple other names that come up, listen, I think the hottest name going forward in this coaching cycle is going to be Mike Elko at Duke. Now you can sit there and say Duke head coach, whatever. First of all, the guy's been unbelievable. Remember, year one, a year ago, Mike Elko won 9 games at Duke. 9 games. And the crazy part was, if you go back and look, they lost a couple close games as well. They could have easily been a 10 or 11 win team in year one under Mike Elko. So obviously he had success last year. They're now ranked. Remember, they beat Clemson to open the season. They're 3-0 going into a little game at UConn this weekend, the house that Torres built, Rentschler Field, baby. But he is going to be the hottest name in coaching. And people would say, well, he has no ties to Michigan State. Well, he's kind of an interesting background guy because he is a guy that has ties everywhere. Grew up in the Northeast. He's a Jersey guy, but he was an assistant coach at Notre Dame, really successful at Texas A&M. It is worth noting, Texas A&M was actually not terrible until he left, and they have completely fallen off a cliff since he's been gone. And obviously he's having great success at Duke. So you just think about what I just said. Northeast grew up, Midwest at Notre Dame, Southwest part of the country at Texas A&M, or at least Southern part. And then, of course, kind of in that mid-Atlantic area to the south in Duke. So there's no area of the country that he seemingly doesn't make sense at. I think the one big question with Mike Elko, as the carousel plays itself out, other jobs are going to open up. They always do. And is it possible that he's going to be a number one candidate pretty much for every job that opens up? For example, I'll just give you a hypothetical. Let's say it really falls apart for Texas A&M. Texas A&M hosts Auburn this week. What if Hugh Freeze walks into town and puts up 40 points and they win 40-13? You think that heat isn't going to be on Jimbo Fisher? Now, I get that the buyout is insane. And if I had to guess right now, I believe Jimbo Fisher will be the coach when Texas A&M walks out of the tunnel in 2024. But I just bring it up to say that if Jimbo Fisher got fired, you don't think Mike Elko would be the first phone call that they made? I think he probably would be. Ties to the university. They had success under him. He's killing it at Duke. So the only point I'm trying to make is he's going to be the top candidate everywhere. Another name I've heard, a little bit of a quiet, success that he's had, or quiet just fall that he's had, I should say. Jim Leonhard. So Jim Leonhard was the NFL defense star, was the Wisconsin defensive coordinator, was seen as a rising star in the coaching business. And remember, when Paul Chryst got fired last year, he was the interim head coach at Wisconsin, going 4-3 overall. Now, the thing with Jim Leonhard, doesn't have a ton of coaching experience, doesn't really matter. He has ties to the NFL. He's had success at the college level. But I don't know if that name is going to be sexy enough for Michigan State, which brings me to my last thought on this Michigan State thing. And I don't think enough people are talking about it. I think we're talking about the Mel Tucker portion of this, but from the next head coach perspective, I think this is important. Remember, Michigan State just let it be known. They just let it be known. If you're a good enough coach, we will pay you $10 million a year. We have no problem. Some schools are morally against it. Heck, the school in their state, Michigan, for years. We don't operate. Even now with NIL, with the Harbaugh stuff, whatever. Michigan State's like, no, if we get the right guy, we're keeping him. If we get the right guy, we're paying whatever we need to keep him. We are not going to lose that person. And so I just bring it up because in theory, if they are able to continue to keep Mel Tucker, fired with cause. In other words, if they don't pay him another dollar, now they're going to have to pay a lot in legal fees to get out of that deal. But if it saves them $75+ million in the end, it'll be worth it. I just bring it up because that's all of a sudden a lot of money that just became freed up. The $70 million was already committed. It was already there. And so now just the question becomes, will you spend it on somebody else? So to be clear, I think a lot of people are getting raises out of this. But somebody's going to get a bag. And I think also when a school is willing to pay $10 million, it does open up the possibilities of who you can get and who is willing to listen, right? Like if Michigan State was paying $4 million a year, I think there's a lot of coaches that would just say, you know what, we're good. We're happy where we are. But 10 million, there's a lot of guys making $800K as a really good coordinator, making $1 million as a really good group of 5 head coach. I'm just spitballing here. There's really good coaches making 2, 3, 4 million a year that are like, you're going to double my salary and I'm already making 4. Yeah, I'm out. So that is the thing to keep an eye on here. I've been told those boosters that backed the Mel Tucker contract, including Matt Ishbia, who is the Phoenix Suns head coach, they will continue to support the football program in whatever way is needed. So don't think because Matt Ishbia spent $1 billion or $1.5 billion or $2 billion or whatever it was on the Suns that he's pulling his money from Michigan State. It's going to help Michigan State football. He's got their back. And because of it, it's going to be fascinating to see who becomes the next Michigan State football coach.